So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's SecurityBoulevard.com program, brought to you by TechStrong. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of TechStrong Learning, and we do have an exciting panel for you today. First, I do have just a couple of housekeeping notes to cover. Today's session is, in fact, being recorded. So if you miss any of today's event, or you maybe have to leave early, or you want to share with a friend, the on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session. If you have any questions at all, we want you to send those in to us using the Q&A tab, which can be found on the right side of the screen. That's also where you're going to find the chat tab, and that's where we want you to get to know your fellow audience members, or maybe just let us know from where you are joining us. And of course, before we close out today's program, we are giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around. So our program today is CISO Talk Master Class episode, Catch Lightning in a Bottle. And I'm joined by Beth Ann Bigum, SVP and Chief Security and Compliance Officer at Axiom, Anthony Johnson, Managing Partner at Delve Risk, Matt Newfield, Senior VP and CSIO of Unisys, and moderating today's program, we have Mitch Ashley, CTO of TechStrong Group and Principal at TechStrong Research. So Beth Ann, Anthony, Matt, Mitch, thank you all so much for joining me today. Mitch, do you want to go ahead and get us started?
Yes, very much. Thank you so much, Cody. Appreciate you kicking things off. It's a great pleasure to be joining everybody on our live roundtable edition of CISO Talk. This is a video series that's available on techstrong.tv. We've been going at this a while, Matt, right? Over a year at least. Focused really on the conversations that CISOs are having or need to have with each other and with others in the business. And we most recently, kind of building off some work that Matt had done, we decided to put on this master class series. The idea being of what are the things that we can kind of consolidate together into topics that would be helpful to people who are maybe advancing in their career, just CISO role. Maybe they're new and relatively speaking in that role. Maybe that's just something where we aspire to be, or we've been practicing this for a while and we have been practicing. We need help, right? We help each other. So Matt had organized a talk that he gave that we turned into this masterclass series. So Matt, good to be joined by you and our illustrious panel again today.
It's always a pleasure. Thanks so much, Mitch.
Great pleasure. Before we get into it, I'm going to mention what the topics are, and then we're going to kind of jump right into it. Beth Ann, would you give just a bit of an introduction for yourself? Tell us about you.
Oh, no, for sure. And again, thanks for the invite. Good to see everybody. And thank you for taking the time to spend an hour with us on this journey. My name is Beth Ann Bigum. As I mentioned, I'm at Axiom. Spent a lot of time overseeing our security and compliance posture there. I'm a big I geek out a lot on new tech. So looking forward to our conversation today as it relates to how we're managing the evolving threat landscape, how we're looking at tech and our investment stack, and then also, how are we going to continue to demonstrate compliance as we know we've got new regulatory drivers coming in. At the same time, we've got an insurance industry that's a little bit skittish. So thanks again, Mitch, for having me.
Can you say hurricane season? No, that's all different.
Goodness.
But yeah, exactly. Anthony, and by the way, this is our best. Not that we pick favorites, but this is our best of the best analysts. So we put together for our episodes. So now that I've helped inflate the ego, even a little bit more there, Anthony, would you introduce yourself?
Well, thank you. So Anthony Johnson. I like to say I'm a recovering CISO. So I used to be a CISO at companies like GE Treasury, Fannie Mae, JP Morgan. And now I'm a founder of a market research company where we work with cybersecurity startups, help them to have more meaningful insights about the people they're reaching out with. And I do a lot of mentoring, coaching with CISOs, CIOs, and it's fun to kind of take all that and just be a research person and then actually figuring out, this is what the business means by prioritization. Okay, got it now. Because you make all sorts of crazy decisions when you have to live and die off that revenue. So it's a different perspective, but a lot of fun.
Very cool. And Matt, I would love to have you touch on, we talk about this once in a while. You have a unique role, and that's part of one of the first episodes we did was on the evolving conversation of what the CISO role is. You're not just a CISO, not that that isn't an important enough job. It is, but
Absolutely.
a lot of those roles are being combined and uplifted in the organization. Tell us about how your role has evolved to where you are.
Absolutely. So started off as the CISO here at Unisys, and then evolved the role to also take on the responsibilities of the CIO, as well as our security service and delivery team and our security engineering team. So we've really tried to bring these things together, and learned a while ago that the IT function really should be the support of a security program instead of what's classic the other way around, which is security supporting and holding up the IT function. So it worked to be more forward thinking here at Unisys.
Evolving from security is part of everything to security has to be part of our strategy and where we're headed, right?
Exactly.
So we'll get a little bit more into that topic. I just want to mention briefly, that was our first episode. All these available on techstrong.tv. There's a link up in the top of the chat. Please jump in, tell us where you're joining from, and join us on chat. We're going to have some conversation going on there. But our conversations that we had, we talked about the evolving role of the CISO. First episode, we talked about the role of frameworks, how that can help advance and accelerate things that you need to make happen, how we think about active response strategies for when incidents occur, and they do occur and they will occur. And also how to treat your plan as your security plan as it's already out of date. You better think of it as a constantly evolving strategy, not something you touch every 6, 12, or 24 months. And then our fifth episode was about communication, both up and down the chain, but also to functions and with functions you may not talk with every day. Maybe it's legal, maybe it's corporate communication, maybe it's HR, maybe it's other things too. But not just with our technical teams and organizations anymore. So Anthony and Beth Ann, I'd love to hear your perspective on how you've seen or where you think the role of CISOs are evolving.
Yeah, I think you're right, Mitch. It is, we're in a landscape where as a contributor, leader, and someone that's supporting my team, you're constantly looking at the issues and our approach to defend from these multiple lenses. And to your, and if I'm not pivoting in relation to how the business is changing, within a year, you're off center, right? And so it's interesting and how that, and I'll give an example of, I think maybe a year, even 2 years ago, when we would talk about frameworks and security certifications, it was really, you could really pass an industry recognized cert, by building out some really fundamental principles. But at the end of the day, if you're focused more on that governance side of the role, you could do pretty well. Obviously, you have to have a really strong, perimeter defense, but you were sort of passing these certs, right? It's a total different environment now. It's all about hygiene, right? And it's funny because every time we see a change or evolution to a certification process, I'm constantly sort of digging through it to see if we're really zeroing in on hygiene at this point, or are we still sort of looking at more of that sort of policy governance side of it. At the end of the day, we're defending at the code level and understanding how my partners that are driving revenue, what the work that they do is changing at the code level. That's where I have to keep my ear to the ground, right? And pivot based on that sort of construct. So it's evolving. I'm finding myself more involved with understanding the business and how we're driving revenue to then translate that into my updated defense program.
Let me add on that just briefly. I think that one of my favorite things that I like to kind of talk about and chat with people kind of on this topic is what Beth Ann just really kind of emphasizes, spending time with the business. And what does that really mean? Because there's so many different versions and definitions of what business oriented means. If you're business oriented, your business could be expansion oriented. It could be process oriented or execution. And one of the questions that I love to talk to security leaders is how much, or a question I like to ask them is, how much time are you spending with the business leaders? If you're not spending probably 50% of your time, then you actually don't know where the business is going. And if you can't answer the question of like, hey, great, you're the CISO, what's the company's growth plan for the next year? And they're like, well, I don't know. We're focused on blah. Okay, so by the time you get that answer, the business will have already moved on, and you are then just a burden system along the way, right? You're so diverged. That's exactly it, right? And that's where you have to evolve. And that evolution means you can't be the person who's spending all the time in the spreadsheets and with the compliance and the vuln, which is all fun sometimes, looking at the tech, which is fun. But you have to be sitting there spending that time talking with the business of like, well, no, what is our growth plan? How are we marketing, right? Because that marketing component is going to add some new exposure. It could be your marketing team wants some crazy data. Take Oracle. Super fascinating. Now, every company, every attacker group is like, hold on. If you guys didn't see it, Oracle was sued with filed with a class action yesterday, I think it was, because of so much data they're tracking. And now all these companies and threat actors are like, hold on, Oracle has all that data? Oh, that's super interesting now. Oh, I have a new reason to go after Oracle, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, and look, I think that this is probably one of the most key topics. A lot of us who are in these roles grew up as geeks, right? And that's a term of endearment. We were firewall engineers, we were server engineers, we were network architects, and we evolved our career up into these roles. And it is difficult for a lot of people that want to get into this role or are newly in this role to really be able to be a business leader and understand that's what we are. We're business leaders, and we need to allow our engineers to take that tech and have fun with it so that we can maintain a certain business level conversation. And, there are ways to do it. So, Anthony, you're talking about that 50% of your time. My running joke here is 50% of what time, right? 50% of zero is zero. And I will take, that's my free time right now. And I'll give you 50% of what I don't have to do these other things. But you got to start thinking different. We've talked on some of these episodes about BISOs and how some organizations and some CISOs have really embraced this concept. And for those that don't know, that is a business information security officer. So who's a BISO? Well, an aspiring CISO, an aspiring CIO. It could be someone in business who wants to understand security, but they can be that bridge that gives even more than 50% of their time with those business leaders. And I also think it's important that we need to step up. And you will not be a part of those conversations if you're waiting in the wings and you're hoping someone's going to brief you one day on what's going on. Never, ever, ever, ever going to happen, right? You need to be in the room. And Beth Ann, I cut you off. So
no, you were spot on. And the only thing I wanted to add to that is my trajectory, my journey was from the GRC side, like heavy audit and assurance. And I can tell you, when you look at the 12 domains across information security, that's the domain where we're not investing a lot of transformation, right? And at the end of the day, shift left of boom, whichever terminology you want to use, if we train our employees to identify that risk from a code, digital, that transforms everything else that happens along that life cycle. But the thing I wanted to share was when we talk about translating and understanding the business and you're coming in from that risk perspective, what's the problem? The problem is you're constantly trying to over control the environment. And so just as we're developing and grooming our engineers to understand how to, translate business into a digital way to protect it. From a GRC perspective, we have to also teach our employees to transform how do we define the controls in an automated fashion so that we are enabling business growth versus containing it or restricting it. And so it's just a very interesting paradigm.
Yeah, look, we have to be, we should be the office of yes, but. instead of the no, go away, right? Because that's what we used to be. It's like, it was always the joke, and I think why some of us get along so well with in-house counsel or attorneys, because they're the office of no, and I'm like, well, hey, so are we. I mean, right? They don't want to take on any risk, just like we
Brothers
don't. But
and
that's
sisters.
yeah, you can't do that anymore. That's a great idea, but please, we got to do these things to make sure that you're not, dumping everything into a database that's sitting out on the internet. And, you can take everything we're talking about and really boil it down to culture as well. You got to build that culture where people are actually looking and paying attention. And, you have to have a bit of paranoia in the environment. And there are ways to do that. We call it gamification, but there are ways to do that inside of an organization that's not threatening. You don't want situations where people bring stuff up and there's a problem. Yeah, Mitch?
Yeah, do shoot the messenger. What you made me think of is just like the land of no, moving away from that moniker, that attitude. We used to also talk about, we'd like a seat at the table. I think we're at the point of, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're already late. And B, don't wait for somebody to ask, go grab a chair, get your butt up there and start talking to the business folks. And I just got Anthony. What? Go.
So I'm going to use a very American thing, Thanksgiving, right? There's Thanksgiving tables, and then there's the kids' table at Thanksgiving.
Oh.
Right? And sometimes security leaders think just because they're at the kids' table that they're at the table. They're not, right? Like there's a real grown-ups table that's still happening, and it's this distinction between what I call the little C and the big C. It's the little C is focused on my tech, my thing, how it very, very inward IT cybery. And the big C is often focused on, okay, what was our quarterly objective? Okay, how did we do this? How did we not do this? Right, where they're really looking at the business alignment and strategy piece here. And there are ways to get there, though. And it starts with understanding, what are they talking about at that table? Because if I don't understand what they're talking about at the table, I'm not going to be invited to that table, right? I can go find a way to go sit at the table. And sometimes you'll see this at Thanksgiving. A kid will just sit down at the table, and they're like, well, it's adding value to the conversation. So, I mean, just like, hey, John, you go sit down at the little kid's table, right? Like that happens.
Yeah. And a lot of you may be asking yourself, or people always ask, well, okay, how do I get there? Right? How do I figure out that path? And, we've talked about it in all the episodes, but we've even had some very key episodes of CISO Talks around this, and that's mentorship, right? What I find very interesting in our world is how insulated we become. Right. We think that, and I'll use Beth Ann and I right now just because Anthony owns a company, but, she and I both work for larger organizations, that we cannot speak together. We cannot collaborate. We cannot mentor each other because at some point someone else may think there's some competition there. And that's crazy to me, right? We're all on the same side of this fence, which is defense against adversaries. It's the protection of the associates within our organization, our personal families, our career, our reputation. That's what we do every day, and we should be doing it together. So I would tell everybody in the audience, anybody listening or you're talking to, first step, get a mentor. And if that mentor, the only one you can get is in the organization that you work for, you're doing it wrong. Right, your mentors need to be out there, and people you work with in industry that you can have honest and open conversations and get honest and open feedback without problems. And it is absolutely critical to do that.
And I think where we are right now, security, and I know we've talked about this before in one of our other sessions, security is the enabler of a frictionless ecosystem. The question is, how do you shape that narrative in terms of, to Anthony's point, the drive, the direction, what your revenue targets are? Because when you start to have a conversation around, I will enable that through, whatever it is you're driving from a strategic perspective, that's when the leaders that are at the big C table start to engage and listen, because you're speaking in terms of their business. Yeah. You're speaking in terms of, I'm going to enable you And then once you get that seat, you can articulate an even stronger terminology, which is, I've got to drop first. I'm the front runner. I'm the quarterback. I'm going to clear. And then they can see it because they've seen you enable their business versus still thinking about your organization and the shop from something as a back office capability.
Yeah.
That was the little C table talking there, by the way.
One thing to also, it's really weird, going from a practitioner for 20 plus years to now running a business. And we do some really interesting data collection, and Matt might have a reaction to what I'm about to say, but so just watch that face, watch his face. So like, even as I think about my business, right? And I imagine, hey, we grow 10 years from now, I actually have to really think about, and having been a CISO, like, would I have a CISO actively as part of the real senior leadership team?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because what would they do, and how are they going to add that value? And I think it becomes really predicated on, one, are they dialed into what we're trying to do as a company, or are they a person of no? If they're somebody who's like, okay, we need to do this, we need to do that, I'm like, okay, that's great. Let's run it through the CIO and the CTO and those types of things. So it's this hard thing that I even struggle with. Right.
Yeah, but isn't it, you bring up a great point, but isn't that a great way to evaluate if you have a CISO that's forward thinking or you have a CISO that is looking backwards? I mean,
100%.
if you pulled me as the CISO right into a meeting and we were talking business, and you and I talk a lot, and I was like, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that, that's risky. Oh my God, what are you, crazy? You can't do that. You want to connect to the internet? Are you insane? You would stop talking to me, and you would go find another CISO to have a conversation with. The same with your CIO. If we're not, as Beth Ann was talking about, those business enablers and drivers, you got the wrong person in your organization. But if you don't have the conversation, you'll never know.
And tying it back to everyone listening, right, and watching, it's be that person who can actually have that conversation, right? Yes, we are supposed to illuminate the risk as security practitioners, but our job isn't to eliminate it. It's to illuminate it. This is what we're dealing with. This is how we can get to that 100% market growth by doing X, Y, or Z, expanding our footprint here to scale. Awesome. This is what it's going to cost us in pain and potential fallout. But then the business has to make that decision. So it's so critical to really be dialed into the business, like Beth Ann was saying.
The whole topic of communication was a whole episode we spent on that. I think it was our last episode, actually. And part of it was we're kind of getting to some of those issues. One is being able to understand to talk business, right? Don't go there to talk threats against the firewall or your latest APT or whatever it is. That's not what they care about. Yes, they do. They care that you care about it. They don't care about it. But it was also talking with parts of the business all around the table, not just to the CEO or the board, head of the board. What do we do to develop our chops at being effective, fluid communications with all around the table?
I like Matt's idea. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Anthony.
No, go ahead. I have a practice. I'll go, please.
Okay, good. Oh, hopefully my practice matches your. Okay. I like Matt's idea with a mentor, but I want to be really specific. It's a mentor to help close a gap in a certain area. So when I'm dialoguing with a line of business, it could be like, let's just say products, right, or whatever. And I can sense that there's some components to the work that they're doing or the strategy that they're driving, and I'm just not connecting it. I go get that mentor and help me really drive my insight, right? And so I like to, at any given time, I may have 2 or 3 mentors helping guide me through certain communication and dialogue areas of growth, so that I'm starting to engage, it resonates with them, and then I pick up. So on my LinkedIn post for today's class, I said, mastering is how fast you can pick up that rapid learning and immediately start deploying it, right? And I think when you surround yourself with these very intentional groups of mentors, it helps drive that faster adoption on communication.
What I've always done in the past, and this is actually reinforced by COVID for me, is like when I joined JP Morgan as CISO for the investment bank, in my first 3 months, I had over 300 meetings, 300 one-on-ones with people in various business units, et cetera, and all the way down to analysts, where I would go down and be like, okay, who's the top performing analyst in our operations team? Who's the least performing? And I want to sit down with them and just like talk to them, get to know them. Fraud. What I learned, effectively, is that it's not necessarily being a master at the tech at this level. It's a master at networking and building relationships. And you realize that there's some junior person who's disgruntled because nobody's been listening to them. And there's this thing, and you're like, oh my gosh, that is a real thing that we need to do. So I would say talk to everybody. And it was so important to me that every time I had somebody join my organization, their manager had to assign the 40 people that person needed to talk to in the first 2 months. Because then you build a network of just people talking to people. And when you go talk to that business leader 3 months later, you can say, oh, I heard about this project that you're running and it's really important. They're like, yeah, it's a key thing. I've got so-and-so, like, yeah, I was actually talking with Sarah. She's really, you're part of it, right? That's a really meaningful way to kind of get dialed in.
And that ties to relationships. This is a relationship business because, again, people are not going to be comfortable bringing things to your attention if, one, they think it goes into, the black hole at the center of the Milky Way, or if they think they're going to get in trouble for bringing it to you. And you do that through relationships, not through announcements, tech, portals, all that kind of stuff. But I agree, because you have those 4 conversations, even if it's a department of 1,000 or 10,000, word gets out, and it gets out fast. Someone with this title, right, with Beth Ann's SVP title, actually was willing to have a conversation with someone that did not have that title, and may report to someone who reports to someone who reports to some, depending on how big that organization. It really resonates, especially if you're on camera, you're real, you're just talking. Tell me about you, not this is what I do, this is what I need from you, and right. And I think one thing Beth Ann brought up, and we're gonna hit on it again. Mentors to me are not in your field.
Yeah.
If you're trying to be a CISO and all of your mentors have CISO or CSO in their title, that's wrong, right? To the points you're hearing, mentors to me are, one of my key mentors is a CFO. He's been a key mentor of mine for 15 years because I am not a CFO. That is not what I do. It took me quite a while to understand what an EBITDA was, right? And I'm like, that's a really long acronym. But by having a CFO, he was able to help me so that when I'm having conversations with the CFOs I work with, 1, I don't sound like an idiot, but 2, when they're talking, I can help understand their point of view, because I've had this conversation with him so many times that, he has been honest with me, and I'll say something. He's like, yeah, you say that to me if, we work together, and I wouldn't talk to you again. I'm like, whoa, okay, take a note. I'm not going to say that.
By the way, EBITDA is not an insect from South America.
See, exactly. It has a T, a D, a B, an A. It has all sorts of letters.
I was just going to add that Alan Kay, I don't know if you've heard of Alan Kay. He was a researcher at Apple fellow. He actually was at Xerox PARC. He had this saying, I don't know who discovered water, but it wasn't a fish. You are in a system. You are in a bubble, no matter who you are, where you are. And there are things you will never see without an outside perspective, whether it's outside of you, your organization, your company, your discipline, whatever. And that's, to me, that's one of the most important things about mentorships, is getting that perspective you can never have yourself. And that's super valuable.
So let me just close the mentoring thing out with everybody, because then the next question is, well, how do I get a mentor? Just ask. We're all on LinkedIn. You join groups like this. The worst case scenario, if you were like, wow, Anthony's background is the most amazing thing, or Beth Ann's background is the most amazing thing, I want them to be a mentor, hit them up on LinkedIn. The worst case scenario is they say, no, I don't have time. But again, we're not people of no. It would be no, but hey, if you talk to this person or this person, I can put in a good word for you because I already have people, that I know could be really good mentors for what you're looking to do. So you got to get out there and ask. Mitch, just in essence of time we're about halfway through and want to keep a real conversation going as we close this out. Prior to us going live, we were having an interesting conversation about let's get real about the world of cyber today, especially given where the economy is globally, given where tech is, and what we just came off of, which for a lot of companies was a lot of free spend. They had a lot of extra budgets going into the pandemic that they may not have today, depending on who you work for. And if you have a ton of extra budget and you're in security, I'd love to talk to you because you're a unicorn right now. And the concept that a lot of people are dealing with attrition, and it's significant. It's very painful. And the attrition thing, just to throw out there, that I'm seeing, it's not just attrition from I am a security engineer in company A and I'm going to go make some more money to be a security engineer in company B. I'm actually seeing a significant amount of people leave security. I was a security engineer and now I'm going to go be a sales engineer because I can't handle 24/7, 365 stress anymore, or waking up and then looking at my phone going, all right, did I miss any phone calls? How many texts do I have? Is my Signal messenger going off? Oh, good. Oh, thank God I can go have coffee, right? And we're seeing a lot of that, and how this panel is seeing that in the world. Are you seeing it, and what we're doing about it?
Anthony, go for it. I know you're passionate. You kicked off the conversation earlier.
I think what's really interesting here is that, like you said, we went from a world of where people were, plugging along, innovation, buying things, to a pandemic where largely money became very flexible to make tech work, right? And we did some Herculean things. We went from companies saying, hey, listen, we're never going to be able to go fully remote. We can't even support that. It'll take us 4 years. And then the pandemic happened and we're like, no, we figured it out in 3 weeks, right? Like, oh, okay, great. Did you make any risk concessions? No. I suddenly, what would have taken you 3 years, you did in 3 weeks, and you had no new risk. You were lying then or now, right? And then you have these organizations now where market caps went up. The stock market, was going into a party, and all of a sudden, budgets were going, and then all of a sudden it's down, and it's down in really, really big ways. And cybersecurity is not fully insulated from that, right?
That's right.
You have roles that are no longer being backfilled. You have tech things that they're like, well, listen, we didn't have that thing for the last 4 years, for the last 10 years. Do we need it now in the time of market downturn? Super hard, right? I had a buddy reminded me of an old quote from GE, which is, when you get shot, fall down. Right? Like, wow. in a meeting, right? Like, and you go in, you're like, hey, we need this thing. It's a new risk. Like, but do we need it right now? Like when you get shot, fall down, and figure that out. How do you come back to have that meaningful conversation? Because the business market is different. Even the vendors are going through massive aspects of consolidation. And this is going to be a whole new world, and budget is not as free flowing. So, yeah, Beth Ann?
Well, I think, Matt, you having a CFO mentor is exactly where I was going to dovetail into this. When I talk to a lot of startup companies, the first thing I share is I may be a CISO, or security focus or lens, but the minute that I'm interested in a product, I become a CFO. And I have to start asking questions. And I think there's the compression, to Anthony's point, that we have to understand as security leaders is we can't keep buying these products, right? We have to do our own or conduct our own rationalization. And so I think, and when you couple that with how the actors are changing their practice, I don't know if I'm necessarily looking for that, that long-term investment, 3 to 5 years. I literally am going to need to be able to turn investments faster so that I can keep at the pace of where the market and where the tool set needs to be. So with that being said, there's this combination of managing. I don't need to have the CFO tell me to cut. I'm going to rationalize every year, and I'm going to bake that into my methodology. And in that methodology, I'm therefore going to be able to self-fund what I need to go find. So, but to do all of that requires a little bit of understanding of the finance side, the technical side of finance. And I think, Matt, you're spot on with having a CFO mentor to help guide you through that thought process. I think there's more to unpack here, but I think as it relates to our traditional investment strategy and to where we need to be, I think it's definitely going to change, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on that.
Go ahead, Anthony.
I was going to say one thing I always used to love asking teams is, like, I remember I had this Intel team. They would create this great report, and I asked them, like, well, who reads the report? And then they're like, oh, well, it's really detailed. I'm like, well, who reads it? We went to that business unit, and I was like, if you had to pay for this, like, here's the cost of it. Like, here's what this actually costs you. If you had to pay for this every quarter, would you? They're like, no, I wouldn't buy this report, right? And I think it's a really fair question of where you look at cybersecurity teams, because I think business leaders will come around and say, okay, we have big four, we have large organizations that provide well-managed security services. And now it's not just do I want it in-house or not? It's a cost piece. Can I get a like cost, better service, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even insurance protections built into things. And security leaders need to recognize, I think, and realize, like, that's a potential factor for them that they're going to be compared against. It's not just the money spigot's flowing. You can assume you're going to get a 10% headcount increase and 5% budget increase every year. Like, and this happens pretty significantly in pharma over the last few years. A lot of pharma organizations have actually outsourced their incident response, security operations, and those functions to Big Four consulting. Now, whether they're happy or not, there's always opportunity. But it's much more cost efficient in some cases, especially when you get to how do we hire this talent? How do we retain this talent? Like, do we want to go to war with the big banks who can just add 20% to someone's base, and we can't compete with that?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, look, that ties back into having an honest conversation, and it's a hard conversation to actually have, because a lot of us have built what we think are great programs, but let's go back to a really early part of this conversation. That great program may not cover the entirety of the business, right? It's a great program. And you as you think about expanding it out, you go, well, hold on, this great program costs $1. I know now where the business is going, up, down, wherever that business may be. Can I afford to grow this program on its current trajectory? And that is a hard conversation to have.
Sorry. I just got to say this one thing here. When you said that, Matt, what it actually made me think of is that for years, we always assumed that data centers would be internal, because we're like, we want to own the data centers, we want to control it. But somebody came up with a cleaner, scalable, outsourced model in cloud, and businesses are like, of course, if you're not adopting that, take that same practice or same methodology to an internal cyber process. Is it an inevitability? I don't know, but it's a conversation that we should be thinking about.
But it's also a cycle. Let's be honest. There was a huge push to cloud, then there was a huge push because all these data centers were like, we're empty, please come back. And now, it's the same with IT outsourcing. There was this huge transfer, but security has done this years ago. We talked about risk transference as a methodology 15 years ago, where internal people are like, well, I don't want all the risk, so I'm going to hire that company and give them all the risk. And then they realized when bad things happen, they were still fired. So like, well, that was stupid. So I'm going to bring that risk back in because, those outsourcers weren't doing a good job. And it but you got to constantly be thinking that way and
Yeah.
watching where the market's going.
Shared risk isn't no risk.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Something that we're kind of going in and out of is this idea that how we have to be much more mindful of the speed we have to operate, right? The business is looking to accelerate how it makes decisions and pivots and turns and goes after things. It has to be competitive today. And markets are different industries, but I think that's generally true for everybody. And just the days of my budget effectively is already spent. I mean, once I get my budget approved, I know what it's going towards. That's gone. You've got to forget that kind of thinking. To your point, Beth Ann, you brought up the issue of speed. I want to hear more of your thoughts around how we have to increase our own velocity and how we not just follow what the next request is to being with and maybe ahead.
Yeah, and what I'm going to share, I'm really sort of weaving in also what Anthony and Matt just mentioned. If we are running at the pace of the business, meaning I understand what my colleagues are, what their intention are, what their targets are, and then I translate that into, okay, how do I enable them through protection or whatever that design is going to be? I have to be ready in place a year before them. Right. So the speed of how I'm thinking about our practices, our processes, which I can't remember who mentioned it at the start of the talk today, but it means you're constantly evolving your security strategy. We're no longer in a position where I can develop a 3-year strategy and just hold and mature it. I am going to produce and evolve as soon as my colleagues at the table evolve. And then to our conversation, hopefully I'm not breaking up because we have a thunderstorm coming in here. But,
You're great. You're good.
Oh, good. But, and then it's my remit to start communicating with that strategy. Here's what I heard you say. Here's how you're going to see me respond. Here's my spend. And oh, by the way, I'm mapping that spend back to their revenue targets. I'm not going to map the spend to a security target because it just won't resonate.
Yeah. And can I throw one other thing on top of that, which I also think is important as you're hearing this? A lot of us are starting to look at our business, our organizations, security organizations, IT organizations, to what both Beth Ann and Anthony have said. We are the outsource. So whether I outsource what we do to someone else, but the business has to want to hire us, right? I am not a foregone conclusion in all of the business units here and at the other organizations I've worked for. We've got to compete for that business, and you have to compete on a multitude of things. Do you have a service they actually want? Are you giving it to them at a cost that they don't go, why am I paying for this? Right? Are you partnering up? Do you have the BSO? You got to be clear in what you are building. And that is actually very difficult because, there's a lot of investment that has to go into that, and your ROIs could be hard to calculate. But even goes to one of the comments that's in the chat here about, a lot of people make assumptions about these things as well, that I'm going to sign up for a service and therefore it's secure. And that's just not the case, right? I mean, people don't want to sign up for secure services if you really think about it, because secure services are ones that they can't mold to their needs. It's always the joke on whether you like Apple products or not Apple product. It doesn't matter to me, but you can't muck around with a lot of Apple settings because they want to be secure. I'm with you, but you go to another platform that you could do all sorts of craziness with, and that is a less secure by default potentially because they allow you to do so much more.
That's a really interesting thing. It's something I've like been living and learning, right? When coming over to go build my own thing, of where I have to make these trade-offs and think about, like, would I accept 20% slower customer growth, market growth, to be 50% more secure? Like, as a security practitioner, like the Anthony from 4 years ago would have been like, yes, of course, that's the right answer here, blah, 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 for what regulatory. And I'm sitting here as a founder, like, 20%? like
No, the answer is we want to go as fast as we want to go, and we want to be 50% more secure.
It is, because what's really interesting though is that, and there's been a lot of research that especially newer companies now, they don't actually win the market because of superior technology or is a great idea, but it's timing, right? And if timing, and if all these MBA researchers, doctorates are talking about how market timing and capturing the market fast enough is the key of whether you become Google or not, anything that slows down that growth becomes a multiplicative impact of like, we got to hit timing right, and you want us to go slower. That's a super hard pill to swallow.
It is, but if you can change the conversation a little bit, right? So, and I'm sorry, Mitch, but I just want to throw it out there. It's slower potentially, right? And I use a house analogy. If you wait and you think about it from the perspective you just put out, that's like building a home and going through that final walkthrough. And you're the buyer and you're in there and you're walking through, and the builder's like, "You love the home." You're like, "I love this house." And they're like, "Great, we got to rip all the walls out. And we're going to put all the electrical components in. We'll see in a few weeks." Right? And if you did it up front, yes, it's probably going to be slower than if you do it without. But doing it after the fact can be way slower, more expensive, and lead to significant risks that all of us have experienced. Mitch, I interrupted you.
No, I wanted to do a bit of a pivot. We've got just a little bit of time left. We haven't really talked about both the changing nature of the threats that we face, but more importantly, I think the change in attitude of it isn't if we build it, we'll be compromised or hacked. It's we all will, right? Last week is LastPass. Next week it's somebody else, right? Everyone is under threat and under siege, and everyone will experience a break-in or a hack. And your response strategy isn't something you kind of break glass and go grab the axe, right, for that one time when it happens. It's an active, it is already kind of in memory, loaded, ready to go, and pre-run, ready to roll out. But we have to adapt that too. It's a changing landscape. All of it's changing.
You guys ever see Deadpool?
Deadpool?
Oh, go ahead, Anthony.
Of course.
Deadpool 2. So there's this lady, she's like, he's like, "What's your superpower?" She's like, "I'm lucky." And he's like, "Luck's not a superpower." And she's like dodging cars and so this whole thing for me gets to this question of like, is it better to be lucky or good? Right? And in cyber, like there are some companies out there that you're like, I know this is horrific, but how they were lucky, right? Because if Russia wanted to send a KGB agent to break into my house, I can have all the Nest cams in the world, and that's not going to do anything, right? But I think that's an important piece of saying we have to be good enough, but recognize that that luck is important for us to be connected, networked, mentored with other people to get that feedback, to be like, "Hey, what's kind of going on?" But it is evolving. Go ahead, Beth Ann. Sorry.
No, you're good. This question always makes me a little, because it is just, a matter of time. I think where we are is there's a couple things. One is it goes back to we can't have the same old strategy. We can't have the same approach of looking at our vulnerabilities the way we have. Like our vulnerability management practice is antiquated if we're not looking at and when I mean vulnerability management, I'm not talking about just near network scan. I'm talking all the way up and down the stack, starting with your code, software code scanning practice all the way through, right? If we're not looking at that the same way the actors look at it, we're not even practicing right? So for me, it's a matter of changing how we look at the potential areas of backdoors, how we're analyzing the areas of weakness, not like, "Hey, I finished my scan. You've got one or two high or medium, critical." That's like super old school, right? I don't care if it's, high, medium, critical, whatever. How are the actors leveraging that code, right? How are they leveraging the weakness? And then let's get on it, right? So I don't know. I'm going to defer to Anthony on the lucky piece but I do think that we have to change the way we practice, and we have to change the way that we're communicating the importance of remediating the vulnerability. We have to do it in terms of how the actors are thinking about it, not how we used to.
Yeah, and let's be honest. If we step back, the whole when not if, luck is never a strategy. I mean, I've had enough business executives tell me that if luck could be a short-term strategy, but it's not a strategy. I mean, if you look at companies that have, greater than 50 years of existence, at no point will you see luck in any of their board decks. We're crossing our fingers and hoping the market goes our way is generally not the way things. I'm pretty sure Warren Buffett doesn't go, I'm going to make some money and come on, let's see it. So we've really got to work through this, but you also, there's a lot of humility in our roles. I would love to say any of us are the best at what we do or perfect at what we do, and it's not. And it comes down to a couple of factors that we'll never get away from. One is the human side of this, and we've had series on the human side of cyber. You could put all the controls in place and make your business non-functional. Great, you won't ever get hacked, but you'll go out of business. You can give people the ability to do their jobs, and people make mistakes. And, there are always series of circumstances that occur that cause things to be missed and cause things to happen. And, you just have to be prepped for that. And to me, that's the practice piece of this, is practice failing. And make sure that you get over yourself, because we all fail. Everybody on this panel has gone through it. I guarantee it. You may not know about it, but we've all gone through it. And most of us have gone through it a couple of times at least, right? I mean, it's a lot. I'm being nice, right? I mean, we learn from these failings, and you just have to be able to build from it and realize, I wasn't looking here, or I didn't do this thing, or now I have to go do this thing. And you want to be thinking that way. But let's tie this whole thing back together. If you do not have relationships with the business, if you're seen as the office of no, if you're seen as the jerk in cyber, then when the bad things happen, you will be taken to task and you're out, right? That was the old joke. Go ahead.
There's this piece that we have to deal with, and this is kind of where my poking on this luck versus good thing comes into place. Is that we have an infinite number of vulnerabilities. Like, we might say, hey, we scanned, we have blah blah blah, but in reality, because of the code dependencies, the history, the legacy, open source reliance, it's almost as if, imagine somebody could walk up to your house, press 4 bricks on the side of the wall in a certain way, and the wall falls down. And then they're like, well, the building was built to code. We were compliant. We did the thing. But how was I supposed to know that if you press this brick, this brick, this brick, and did a hula dance, that it would fall down? And that's pretty much what we have built into the code of all the apps that we rely on, right? And it is really important to recognize that you can have the best product, spend the most money, best team members, and still get hacked, right? And so it's a matter of being ready, being engaged in the community, and being able to attempt to anticipate this as much as possible. But you will face things that you will not be able to anticipate. They're going to catch you on the blind side, and you're going to be like, okay, and someone's going to Monday morning quarterback that. Be like, well, you should have known that when that brick was a little more red. Like, really? Like, yeah. Okay, thanks. Right? Like, that happens.
Why didn't you look over there? That one spot versus the 4,000 you were looking at, right? Hey, Beth Ann, you have this compliance program, and I'm assuming your GRC is full. You didn't notice that sub bullet on page 742 of your, yes, that happens, but you got to be ready for it. And you got to know that that's coming, because look, we all like to Monday morning quarterback. I mean, we all do it, but it's hard.
Well, you're on mute.
Mitch, you're on mute.
Sorry, my dog barks here once in a while. Anthony, I still can't get Deadpool out of my mind. I'm my security team. That's all. So, lightning in a bottle was kind of the subtitle of our series here for the master class. We've got just a few minutes left. Maybe we want to go into lightning round. See what I did there?
Oh wow!
Yeah. if each of us want to take a minute, an enlightening round. And so, what is your emphasis for the next 12 months? What are you focused on that you maybe weren't focused on the last 12 months? What's shifted in your perspective? So, who would like to go first? Anybody can grab it.
I can go first. Defense faster. I have another community of CISO, and their motto is defend forward. I like the comment here about how can you fail when you consider the hundreds of vulnerabilities. We're in a position right now where we're using so much open source code. It's just constant practice, constant looking. Our goals for the next 12 months are to move at the speed as much as possible, like we talked about here, and fail forward faster, and then immediately pick up and integrate that learning faster.
So I'll go next. For me internally, the way I'm pushing is better evaluation and adherence of other organizations, right? You build up these nice cores, but it's generally not the nice core that has the problem. It's all the ancillary things, and trying to, again, get others to really understand what we're doing and get adherence. And that is one of our big focuses.
For me, and for particularly for the people that I'm coaching and mentoring on the programs, it's about getting and making getting information or insights from the data. We've spent years and years collecting all aspects of tech data, business data, all of this stuff, and what we have are just big piles of it. And there are very, very few insights that we've used to actually make better decisions. Now that comes into hiring decisions, staffing, consolidation. And if we enter this next 12 months of really, constrained budgets, tougher decisions, and we don't use actual information for that, we might as well have not spent the effort, right? And that goes to the tech buys, to the partnerships, the reaching out to people like, hey, Matt, I got to deal with this. What do you think about that? He's like, oh man, I dealt with that 7 years ago. That's valuable information that I can then take to make a better decision. And so that's one of the things I'm really emphasizing people to look at.
Very cool. Well, before I hand the reins back to Cody to wrap things up, Matt, congratulations on a great series that you were inspired by a talk that you gave, and working with our executive producer, Jody, and a bit of myself helping put this together, I think has been a very successful endeavor. And thanks to our panelists today, Anthony and Beth Ann, of course, and many others that have joined us across the episodes.
Well, thank you all. It's great being here.
Absolutely. And look, what we're trying to do is elevate this up. There's some really great things, the Log4Shell or Log4j, depending on, who you talk to, really opened our eyes. And there is enough out there to show how important the roles that all of you have and all of us have. And what, again, we're really trying to do is elevate it past tech, because there's always going to be the new tech. You don't have to go to many RSA conference to realize everybody's got that silver bullet, and there are so many other things that we have got to focus on that are not silver bullets. Nothing is going to stop your adversary permanently unless you unplug. And so, look, I appreciate everybody. I thought this was a great class, and Mitch, you're the best host. I really appreciate you running this. And to those that joined, I hope you all have a great day. And thanks to the wonderful panel. I mean, seriously, you have to look no further than the people we were able to bring in. They're the best of the best, and you should get to know them.
Yeah.
Echo that sentiment, exactly. Be sure to check this. And this isn't the end. This is just the series that we've been doing around this masterclass. So please check out more content on TechStrong.tv. You can check out the CISO Talk Show, many others that are there. We'll be having more roundtables live every month, just like this one, as well as recorded sessions. So thanks again to all of you, and thanks to our audience. All right, Cody, reins are now in your hands, buddy.
Well, thank you so, Mitch. And I'd also like to thank Matt, Anthony, and Beth for joining us today. I really appreciate your provided insights. So I'd like to remind our audience that this session was recorded. So following this panel, you'll receive an email with a link to access that recording on demand, or you can find it living on the Security Boulevard website at securityboulevard.com/webinars. All right, so now we do have these 4 gift cards to give away. Our first winner is Mark T. Our second winner is Jared D. Our third winner is Claire M. Our fourth and final winner is Diane M. So to our 4 gift card winners, congratulations. Please keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. But if you do not see that email, just check your spam folder.
I've been trying for every one of these series to win those gift cards. I don't get it, Mitch. It's not cool. Sorry.
Maybe in the next episode.
Foreign bank account notices. I don't know what it is. So
That's right.
I'm not winning either. So thank you all. Thanks, Cody.
All
Thanks,
right, everybody.
Tom.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. And I'd just like to remind everyone we do have a survey following up right after we close out. So bye, everyone. Have a great day, and we hope to see you at an upcoming Tech Strong Learning program.